wrap the water bottles we could. We ran out of labels. That's a good problem. And we have about 6 or 7 cases ready for next month. But we still have a lot to do for Saturday. So if you can help in any way, we would greatly appreciate that help. It is from 9 to 1 at 8:30. I will be down there ready to set up. If you can be there at 8:30, go to Light Post and just mark that. That way I can know if someone will be there to help me. If you're wondering about parking, a couple weeks ago or last week when I went, or 2 weeks ago when I went with Cliff, there was parking available close to the farmer's market. Now, I can't make that guarantee, but park anywhere downtown, and if it's too far away for you, just let me know, and I'll come give you a piggyback ride, something. I'll get you there somehow.
That time of morning, there's always parking pretty close around the courthouse.
Yeah, right around the courthouse. So we appreciate the help. I think this is a great opportunity for outreach and evangelism, great opportunity to let the city know that we are here and that we love them and that we are looking forward to helping in any way we can. Let's jump right into our Bible class this evening. We're looking at Daniel chapter 3. For those that have been a part of our Daniel class, we got to Daniel chapter 3, but we did not get very much further. We discussed last week the religious character of Nebuchadnezzar. He is a very religious man for a king. He shared the belief of his people in the existence of many gods. And while the dream that Daniel interpreted for him convinced him in the existence of the reality of the God of the Hebrews, it did not convince him that his false God did not exist. And so he still believed and he still worshiped the very pagan God who comes with a slew of names, Marduk, also Merodach, or simply Bel. He was the national god of Babylon. He had a temple called the Esagila, which was located within the capital city. Now, he was believed to be a god of magic. He was believed to be a god of incantations, which explains a lot leading up to chapter 3. It explains why Nebuchadnezzar looked to the Chaldeans and the magicians when he wanted the dream interpreted, because he assumed that their relationship with the god Bel, with the god Marduk, would allow for them to be able to interpret the dream that he had. Of course, as we saw, that was not capable. They were not capable of doing that. Daniel would then, because of inspiration, because of God's prophetic nature and what he's wanting to share, not only with Babylon in its immediate context, but also for you and I, as we study through it, he is going to be able to interpret the dream, which is ultimately going to lead to where we come in Daniel chapter 3 with the Chaldeans, angry at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or finding a way to put them in a position where they can lower them, destroy them, at least bring them down from the heights that they have been placed in. If you recall, at the end of chapter 2, because of Daniel and his ability to interpret that dream, he gained favor with Nebuchadnezzar, so much so that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were raised up to become government officials. And so in this chapter, Nebuchadnezzar is about to get another irrefutable example of the power of God, not just any God, not his God, but the God of Daniel, the God of Shadrach, the God of Meshach, the God of Abednego. And so we're going to jump right into Daniel chapter 3. I've included a number of discussion questions this week. I imagine that we're going to have to take this week and next week to get through chapter 3. But we'll see. Daniel chapter 3 and verse 1. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits, its breadth 6 cubits. He set it up on the plain of Dura and the province of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar erects a statue, right? Let's jump straight into the question, though. Why do you think Nebuchadnezzar could acknowledge the God of Daniel as real but still cling to his own false gods? What are your thoughts? Okay. Okay, they don't recognize the monotheistic nature of the one true God. Okay, what else? I'm sorry? Okay, his status in front of his people. Right? Nebuchadnezzar could acknowledge the reality of Daniel's God because he saw undeniable evidence of his power. Yet I think what we're going to see especially is this continuation of the character of this king. His pride, his attachment to Babylon, his attachment to the idols are going to keep him from full submission. And like many, he respected God's might, but he refused to surrender his heart and his authority to him alone. And so this is something that I think when we consider the nature of our preaching and teaching as Christians today, we are going to experience a lot of people who share in the same attitude as Nebuchadnezzar, not a belief in false gods, but a belief in the God. They recognize his power, they recognize his blessings, they recognize the gifts that he has given, especially his son, but being asked to let go of everything else that is a part of their life is going to be a challenge for them. It's going to be a struggle. You're basically asking to give up everything of who you are. And we see that in Nebuchadnezzar. We see that today. We see this as a continued growing problem. Now, we don't know how long for certain between Daniel chapter 2 and Daniel chapter 3. We don't know how much time spanned between the interpretation as well as the erection of this statue. But we do know that it is not a small statue. This isn't something that he just crafted willy-nilly. This is something that is mighty. This is something that is 90 feet tall, about 9 feet wide at the base, made entirely of gold. So this is no small item here. It is very likely, as we've already discussed last week, that the idea of the statue itself could very well have stemmed from the interpretation that Daniel gave him. In that dream, for those of you who may not have been with us in chapter 2, Daniel saw, or he told Nebuchadnezzar in his dream, that there were 4 different parts of a statue. The head of gold, which was a representation of Babylon. And then, of course, we had the Medo-Persians, the Grecians, the Romans, all with different elements, with different types of metals and materials. But for Nebuchadnezzar, to hear that he was the head of gold very likely could have inspired him to then make for himself an entire statue of gold. I mean, obviously, he fancied the idea of him being represented as gold in a vision from God. He liked that. In fact, he liked it so much that he saw an image of him made entirely of it. And given Nebuchadnezzar's affinity for his pagan god, Marduk, the god of magic, the god of incantation, he probably assumed that the vision actually came from him and not from the God of Daniel and his companions. Now, we don't know that that's exactly what is going on in Nebuchadnezzar's head, but the very fact that we see him react the way that he does leans to, for many, to believe that we see a misunderstood mind in Nebuchadnezzar, not being able to fully understand, even though he's been shown the truth, even though he's accepted the power of the one who showed that truth, he still does not completely comprehend what it is that he actually saw. And so, we go forward to chapter 3, verses 2 and 3. It says, "Then King Nebuchadnezzar sent to gather the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the province gathered for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up." Okay. Nebuchadnezzar was proud. I mean, we know that. We understand that. He wanted to dedicate it in the presence of his officials. And so these officials probably made a journey from all of the from all over Babylonia to be here for this event. Right? This is going to be a big deal. This is going to be a huge celebration. This is going to be a big dedication for Nebuchadnezzar. This is going to be an opportunity for him to show everybody in the region and in the realm what a mighty king he is, to show them what a mighty statue he has built. Here's my question for you. Why do you think Nebuchadnezzar invited all levels of government to the image's dedication? And what does that say about about how idolatry often becomes institutionalized?
Well, he was self-centered and liked his own power, and he had power over all of those people, so he demanded them to come and be a part of his idolatry.
Okay. What?
You know, there's all kinds of events that happen, and we take a moment to stop and look at those important events and gather all kinds of people together, send them invitations. We do birthdays.
Mm-hmm.
We do all kinds of things to bring people together. Nebuchadnezzar's thinking this is a pretty significant. He wants to bring all those that have any kind of power together because he's in control and they're in control, and he's just bringing them all together to celebrate this thing that he has built with you know money that would have been invested in to make it happen. And of course, he wants it to be more about him a little bit. It's really just a special moment that he thinks that he has created.
Okay. Yes?
I think he also wanted it to be part of what comes next.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Oh, go ahead. Let's one, two.
It's possible he was using it to send a message to surrounding areas as well. I mean, you gather that many people, and to one degree, you could think from a perspective, it could be, okay, who's going to actually come and support this? But at the same time, it might be a message of, look at all this influence that I can have among my people.
Okay. Yes, sir.
On that, it's also a message to people. These people want to be, if they're the next people down, they want to be them. They're the vice presidents, secretaries, that sort of thing. Don't mess with me. I've got to do that. I can build this.
I mean, idolatry can become so ingrained in a culture, in a system, that even clear evidence of the true God doesn't easily break its hold. I mean, idolatry had become so ingrained within these Babylonian people that people and nations can build traditions and they can build powers and pride around false worship until it feels normal and unquestionable. I mean, I think if anything, we experience this today with many of the denominations that we see, but especially those big ones. I mean, remember, I grew up in the Catholic Church, and so this idea of institutionalism was heavy for me, you know, was big for me within Catholicism. So much so that I remember, even as a child, like having to have conversations with my parents because I was baptized as a baby. And I was told that I was baptized as a baby in order to wash away the sins that I had inherited. But I began to court a girl, see a girl, date a girl, whichever one applies to your generation. And I asked her, you know, we got to talking about religion, and she said, "Oh, I'm a Christian." And I said, "Oh, okay." She goes, "But I haven't been baptized yet." And I went, I don't want no devil girlfriend. But here's the thing. That's what had been instilled within me. And when I began to question that even at such a young age, it was like nobody could give me an honest answer. Well, I can't exactly tell you why. It's just what we believe. Because it had been ingrained in so many people that even the priests, the nuns, everybody couldn't give me a solid answer as to why. That idolatry and honestly the power and the pride that can come from false worship can get so great that it feels normal. And I think we begin to see that not only in Babylon, but more than that. The officials who were bidden to come to the dedication doubtless thought it was wise to do so, right? It would have been disastrous for anybody to refuse to show up. I mean, he had already Nebuchadnezzar had already demonstrated his capacity for executing those who didn't obey him. So doubtless that this was in the back of everyone's mind as they made the journey. If Nebuchadnezzar wants us here, then we're going to be there. And so it poses an even deeper question, an even deeper idea on how fear can infiltrate can help to continue to push idolatry even within the hearts of those around them. Now notice what it says in 4 through 6, and it might begin to help us to understand more. It says, the herald proclaimed aloud, "You are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the bagpipe, every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace." Now I want you to remember that the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had was not an entire statue of gold, but a statue representative of 4 different empires. And so he has already been told that the Medo-Persians are going to come and take over the Babylonian Empire. That's not something a king wants to hear. That's not something a king likes to hear. And then he's told that the Grecians are going to come, and then he's told the Romans are going to come. He's told that there are 3 empires that are coming. And maybe he's not told who they are specifically by name, but he's told that there are mighty empires. No king wants to be told that he's going to lose that power. No king wants to live with this idea that he's going to lose the strength and lose the command and lose the conquering land that he has obtained for himself. And so I believe what we see is Nebuchadnezzar trying to push his authority, trying to really lay down the power that he still has. Now, in the book of Revelation, and it's hard not to tie the book of Revelation and the book of Daniel together. And we're going to do that much more later. But in the book of Revelation, there were 2 beasts, one from the sea and one from the earth. This is Revelation chapter 13. Best image I could find, to be perfectly honest. How much of it I agree with, I don't know. When you Google search Revelation chapter 13, you should just see what comes up. This is the most entertaining to me. The sea beast was given his seat and was given his authority and given his power from the dragon, right? From Satan. And he required all under him to worship him. Now the earth beast rose up, operated under the authority of the sea beast, and caused images like Nebuchadnezzar's to be built and worshipped. So those who refused to worship were persecuted horribly, even to the point of being put to death in all kinds of torturous ways. Pagan worship, the refusal of God's children to bow down to a false god, worship of idols is what the book of Revelation was much written about. How do we as Christians deal with the constant persecution or forced nature that we're going to feel from the outside, trying to get us to do something that we don't want and that God doesn't want? And so Nebuchadnezzar did the exact same thing that we see in Revelation 13 the beast would do almost 700 years later. And so we see Nebuchadnezzar basically erect for himself a statue and say, if you don't bow down, if you don't worship, if you don't lower yourself to this representation of me, my kingdom, my power, my prowess, then you are going to die. We see the same thing in the image that John has in Revelation 13. We see that same idea there. So here's my question. What similarities can we draw between Nebuchadnezzar's decree and the pressures faced by early Christians and the Roman Empire, or even believers today? What similarities can we draw there? Think about it. Nebuchadnezzar's decree demanded public loyalty to a false god, much how early Christians in the Roman Empire were pressured to worship Caesar or to face persecution. And both situations reveal ultimately the clash between allegiance to earthly power and faithfulness to God. This constant battle between where are you going to lay up your treasures? Who are you going to serve? You cannot serve both God and mammon. You cannot separate yourselves. You either have to be fully God, for the kingdom, following in His way, His truth, His word, humbling yourself, or you're going to be a part of the world. You cannot try to do both. I think today believers face similar pressures to conform to cultural idols instead of standing firm for Christ. Suddenly we feel this pressure of, I've got to agree with a certain movement. I've got to agree with a certain ideology. I have to align myself with the masses that are speaking louder because I don't want to be, and then I don't want to be canceled. I don't want to be called out. I don't want to be singled out. I don't want to be persecuted. So I'm going to just go along to get along. But in doing so, we force ourselves sometimes to turn our back on God. What we are going to witness in Daniel chapter 3 is the same thing that we see in Revelation 13. John speak of the same thing that Christians dealt with during the days of Rome, the same thing we're dealing with, and the same thing that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are going to deal with. They're going to be put in a position where they have to decide, are they going to bow down and worship this image, or are they going to stand up for what they believe in? But they've already been told what? If you're going to die.
If they don't.
They already know.
Imagine all of those peoples of Babylonia that are not God's people that don't recognize. They probably had no problem bowing down and worshiping because they didn't want to be put in the fire furnace. So their choice wasn't a very godly choice to start with. It just to survive.
Yeah. I mean, what would we do in a similar situation?
Well, a Christian needs to stand his ground regardless of what's going to happen.
What are your thoughts? Any other questions or comments? I mean, look, Revelation 13 and verse 15. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak, might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Don't worship this idol, you die. I mean, the very thought of that, while we sometimes, well, it's not something that we have to deal with. What if we did? What if we had to deal with it? How would we react? Do we have the courage? I mean, these are the lessons that we can draw from a book like Daniel, a book that seems so far removed from 21st century Christianity, but these are the lessons that we can gain from it. Do we have the courage, even in the face of death, to be able to stand up for our God, to stand up for what we believe in? Take a look at verse 7. Therefore, as soon as all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the bagpipe, every kind of music, all the peoples, nations, languages fell down and worshiped the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. God considered idolatry by his people to be on the level with adultery. I mean, he illustrated that in Ezekiel chapter 23 and verse 37. For they have committed adultery. Blood is on their hands. With their idols they have committed adultery. They have even offered up to them for food the children whom they have borne to me. God said this idea of idolatry is equal to adultery. Why? How? Because you have made a covenant with God. Because you have made a relationship with God and you are going against that relationship. You're going against that covenant. You're making a choice to not be with the one to whom you have promised yourself, but rather to something else. So those who are not his people, who engaged in idolatry, were said to be committing adultery, fornication in Revelation 17, verses 1 and 2. In either event, God viewed idolatry as a very personal and serious transgression against him personally, comparing it to the infidelity of a spouse. I mean, one can easily respect how God views idolatry by considering one's own reaction to an unfaithful spouse. How would you feel? And for anybody who has been through that, the pain, the heartache, the sadness in knowing that someone you promised yourself to has turned to another, that's hard. That's hard to swallow. That's hard to handle and to deal with. What God says, when you turn away from me, that's how it feels. In fact, both Daniel and the book of Revelation teach that God would prefer his children go to their physical deaths than to practice idolatry. Because there's no circumstance under which idolatry is acceptable to God. Period. And we're going to see that. We're going to see Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego make that declaration. There is nothing that is going to take me away from my God. Here's a question for you. How do we personally guard against going along with the crowd and more in spiritual matters? How do we guard against going along with the crowd? Practice? Studying the Bible? Yes, sir. Okay. Lean upon each other. Extremely hard. But why would you put yourself in a situation where you know that it's a possibility, right?
You look at politics, that's case in point right there.
Hmm? What else? Anybody else?
Prayer.
Prayer? Be careful who you run with. Yes.
First Peter talks about how that when we suffer for the cause of Christ, regardless of what that suffering involves, whether it's ridicule or whether it's physical suffering, that it's cause for celebration,
Mm-hmm.
cause for rejoicing. That's how we look at it. That's proof positive where our devotion and where our minds and our hearts are in possession of God.
Mm-hmm. In the very plan of salvation, we go to baptism. It's not where we should stop. But Revelation 2 verse 10 says that the crown of life is for those who are willing to remain faithful even in the face of death or until death. I think either or is sufficient in understanding of that scripture. But when you consider it to be in the face of death, is our faithfulness willing to be so great that we would put our own lives on the line for it? Yes, sir.
That they have their minds made up. So first starts in the mind, how we guard against anything that is going against God morally or spiritually. So if our minds are pure and we're thinking on this thing, having the mind of Christ, living 2:5, that type of attitude, it's going to help us from even getting to that point. So they knew it, and they knew God would deliver them. They had that belief in their mind already. So
Sure.
the more confidence and the more that we're practicing and focusing on those spiritual things mentally in our minds, then that's going to be to the physical naturally through the progression of what's stronger, the body or what's mind.
I mean, that's essentially grounding ourselves in God's word. That's the idea of grounding ourselves in his word, right? Letting it shape our convictions rather than popular opinion. So we're talking about prayer, we're talking about fellowship, we're talking about the courage to stand for the truth, the truth to help us remain steadfast when the world compromises. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Sure. Sure. Absolutely. Any others? I would say anybody on this side, because I really feel like this side is just. I'm gonna turn this thing in just a second. Yes.
It kind of might be
Mhm.
be easier to crowd people instead of having to lead the crowd. So if you're, for example, you have clean speech and you're not cursing all the time, a lot of times people notice that if you're in a group that maybe they curse a lot more, and they start noticing you never say
Mhm.
these things, and even if you every now and then say, hey, what's another word you can put there?
Yeah.
Small things that then lead to, oh yeah, she probably or he probably wouldn't want to go see that movie because they don't watch that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And then the crowd leads you.
Sure. Absolutely. I see three over here, Rants, and then David, and then yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna say that, and it kind of goes into what Todd was saying. Being vocal about it and letting people know that you're a Christian can help, because then instead of feeling peer pressure to join into something, you feel peer pressure to not do it because now they know I'm a Christian. And if I do go out there with them, they might be like, oh, I thought you were a Christian, right?
Mhm.
So the earlier we can let somebody know, our coworkers, our boss, our family, I mean, the more that they know that religion, faith, even if we don't say what church we're specifically a part of, they can see it's evident, and that helps, I think, kind of smooth it over.
Sure. Absolutely. David, and then.
As far as personally, some we've all experienced life, and there are things that we have done in our past that have given us the experience, right? So we can look at something and we can see what's coming because maybe we've been there.
Mhm.
Maybe we can look at something and we know what's coming because we've seen and we've learned from somebody else's experience. So we personally guard being prepared. You talk about being grounded in the truth. You are, but you also are grounded in the experiences that you have.
Yeah.
You allow those to kind of drive what it is that you do, and also allows you to stay aloof from certain things.
Sure.
To stay away from them just because you know what's coming.
I mean, consider for just a second, but consider for a moment that we have to remind ourselves that the king that was in rule when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Daniel, were young and being raised was Josiah. So we're talking about a righteous king trying to bring the people back to a state of righteousness. But within that, it could easily have been inferred, taught, or told to them that the last time there was a golden statue that their own ancestors bowed down to, it did not go well. It didn't go well when Moses went up to talk with God on Mount Sinai, and he came down and they had erected a golden calf and they were worshiping that, right? It didn't go very well for that. And so we have these moments of learning from our past. Absolutely. Yes, sir.
You were right on it. So that's exactly my point with, and of course it's my bias being in front of the kids
Mhm.
It starts with the youngest generation. It's a battle every day, and it starts when they're 2 years old. And it's like if you show me the boy from age 1 through 7, I'll show you the man that he's going to grow up to be. So it starts with rooting them, you know, near that river of God's word.
Sure.
And then they won't wait.
Sure. Yes, sir.
I think a lot of times, we think about familiar scriptures, the light and salt of the earth, and thinking about Ephesians chapter 6, the whole armor of God.
Mhm.
But sometimes we don't, we might downplay how much the power of that light actually is to those
Yeah.
around us. But it should be a stark difference. We should look different. We should act different. And we should be noticeable
Sure.
to those around us. And if we're not, maybe our light's not shining.
I think I've told this, and I don't know if I've told this story, and she's not here to give me the don't tell this story. Emery's not sick. She woke up with a fever, so keep her in your prayers. When we were in Roanoke, and I was doing my internship with the Roanoke Church of Christ, Catherine worked for a hospice company. And within that hospice company, she worked as an administrative assistant. And she was very quick. She's always been very quick to tell people, don't use that language around me. And after about 3 to 4 months of her being there, She came home one day and she had a big smile on her face. I asked her why, and she said that somebody had said a word, and before she could say anything, one of her coworkers said, "Hey, don't use that language around Catherine." And she just sort of sat back. They were not a Christian. They just knew we don't do that around Catherine. And she had this big smile on her face because she realized in that moment that even though she hadn't had a conversation with them about God, there was clearly influence that was already sort of coming out. That's what we're talking about with a lot of the comments we have had, is that's the influence that we can see. That's that starting young. That's the leaning upon the past. That's the holding on or grounding ourselves in God's word, guarding against how easy it is to go along with the crowd. I mean, case in point, we have seen major companies that are going along with the crowd and failing miserably because they're just, okay, well, if everybody feels this way about something or believes, then we're going to go along with it. And why is it not going well? Why is it not working? Why are we not successful? Because no one promised that going along with the crowd was going to bring success. Just because more people do it doesn't mean that it's the better option or the more, right? It's not. In fact, in Matthew, it tells us that there are two ways. There's the broad way and the narrow way, and the broad is broad because there are more people. Just because there are more people doing it doesn't necessarily mean it's the better option. Okay, we got to continue. Beginning in verse 8. Therefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. Remember, the same Chaldeans who were first originally asked by Nebuchadnezzar to interpret this dream, of which they were not capable. Daniel comes into the picture. He does. And then because Nebuchadnezzar has so much compassion on Daniel, he allows for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to be raised up into positions of power. Chaldeans aren't going to like that very much. And so now, because there is some anger, we're going to see how they have a sense of retribution. Verse 9, they declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the bagpipe, every kind of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." How ungrateful these Chaldeans, who honestly owed these men and really owed Daniel their lives. Because if you recall, they were ordered to be slain by the king for their inability to reveal Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and it was Daniel, at great personal risk, who asked it in haste to intervene and the king's decree and to save their lives. They had to know why Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had been placed over them. They should have been dead. And yet, instead of being grateful that they still have their lives, their pride overcame them. So, why do righteous people often become the target of envy and false accusation? Because there's no true accusation against them. What else?
Somebody's, showing you what's right, you put up a mirror, and that's not comfortable when you're not showing the same thing.
Nobody likes to look at a mirror and look at themselves. Nobody likes introspective behavior, right? When they know that they're living unrighteously. No one likes that. No one likes to look at themselves. Righteous people often expose the darkness in others simply by living in the light. They don't even have to pull them out and put them on a pedestal and say, well, look at all of their sin. just because they are living differently, because they are behaving differently, because they are acting differently than the rest of the world, they are exposing the unrighteous behavior of others. They don't like that. In fact, when we fast forward to the New Testament, when we fast forward to Jesus' ministry on the earth, a lot of those that were angry towards Christ and really angry towards the apostles that came after were angry because they were again exposing their false ideologies, their false beliefs, their unrighteousness, or for the sake of the Pharisees, their hypocrisy, and they don't like that. They don't appreciate when other people are calling them out. Because when integrity threatens corruption or pride, the unrighteous respond with slander to protect their image or influence. Oftentimes, people just want to elicit a reaction and will do anything and say anything they can to get it, because in doing so, what does it do to the righteous person? It discredits them. If they can just get you to not act like a Christian for 1 second, then they can discredit you. And so they will do anything they can to put you in that position. This was a contrived plan by a jealous and prideful group of people to ultimately rid themselves of those who humiliated them. I mean, we see that in the very fact that if we go back and reread at least the ESV's rendering of it, that they maliciously accused. It wasn't just accusing them, there was a malicious intent behind it. That they truly wanted to ensure that these men had found their place. I mean, it's so hard not to compare the Chaldeans of Daniel to the Jewish priests who ultimately contrived the death of Jesus Christ unlawfully. It's the same thing. We don't like you, so we will do and say whatever we can. The number of laws, by the way, that were broken to put Christ on that cross for supposedly breaking laws is unbelievable. Having the trial at night, being one of many, just the time itself in which they took him from being arrested to even being put on trial, so many of their own laws were having to be broken to put Jesus in that position, to make sure that he died. That's how much they despised him. That's what we see here with these Chaldeans, is absolute hate for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. For doing what? Well, because Daniel did what they could not. Because they are now in positions of power. And because, yes, they want to place themselves back into those positions. And what a great way by showing that we have people who are not willing to do as they have been asked to do. Take a look at real quick, because I know we have no time left. But look at verses 13 and 14. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up?" We're going to end it there, but one thing I do want us to notice, because it's one of my favorite things, at least about Nebuchadnezzar, is the fact that he does not immediately say, "How dare you?" but rather gives them an opportunity and a chance. Is this so? Is this true? And I think that is definitely a testament to the character that they had developed for themselves within Babylon. We'll pick up with verses 13 and 14. Any final questions or comments? Okay, remember, take a look at Light Post. Sign up if you can to help on Saturday. There's a lot of things going on. Kyle's also having their trunk or treat on Saturday. If you're able to go to that, I know I'm going to try to take the girls. If there's anything else we can help you with, please.